the Dominion for 1,000 years. The galaxy belonged to the Zereth Dominion. They ruled from the great black throne at the center of the stars. Their ships, vast spiked monsters of metal, hung over every world like silent executioners. Wherever their banners flew, the people knelt. Those who dared to stand were erased. They had crushed rebellions, burned civilizations, and even broken suns in their fury. The galaxy had learned to obey, to fear, to never speak above a whisper when the Zereth were near. But then, one quiet morning, in the cold, void beyond the known worlds, they received a strange signal. It came from an unmarked blue planet, spinning alone at the edge of a minor arm of the galaxy. The signal was simple, short, and disrespectful. Come and see what happens if you try. At first, the High Lords of the Dominion laughed. Joke, one said, his golden mask tilting as he chuckled. Perhaps some desperate slave clinging to hope, another sneered. We should burn their little rock, just to teach them manners, the general suggested. And so they did. A fleet of 30 Zereth warships, enough to level a moon, was sent to the small blue planet. Their mission was simple: destroy everything, enslave everyone, bring back the bodies of their leaders to hang in the throne room as trophies. The fleet's commander, Lord Kyrix, promised to finish the task within a single cycle. One day, he boasted, and this Earth will belong to us. His fleet entered the system in perfect formation, their black holes gleaming in the sunlight. They approached the planet slowly, weapons charged, ready to strike. From orbit they saw oceans glittering under the sun, clouds drifting lazily, green lands full of life, no defense satellites, no war fleets, no planetary shields. It looked weak, fragile, pathetic, Kyrix muttered. Not even worth the effort. But as the fleet descended, something strange happened. One by one, the ships began to fail. The first ship lost its engines. It spun out of control and crashed into the ocean. Vanishing beneath the waves, the second ship's weapons turned on itself, tearing holes in its own hull before exploding. The third ship simply stopped. Its lights went dark. Its crew screamed. Over the coms, before everything went silent, Kyrix stared at the view screens in disbelief. What is happening? He roared. No answer came. One by one, the mighty warships of the Dominion, the terror of 1,000 worlds, were falling like flies. Kyrix tried to issue commands, but his words were cut short by static. On the bridge of his own ship, alarms blared, the screens flickered, and then a strange symbol appeared on every display. A white skull, surrounded by a circle of stars. Beneath it, words appeared in a language he didn't understand at first. Then slowly, horrifyingly, he realized it had translated itself into his own tongue. Welcome to Earth, and then silence. Hours passed. Of the 30 warships sent to conquer the blue planet, only one remained intact, Kyrix's flagship. It was no longer in control. The ship drifted helplessly, its crew cowering as strange shadows moved through the halls, unseen but felt. Some screamed in the dark. Weapons melted in their hands. Some claimed to hear whispers in their ears, soft, cold, mocking. You came to take, a voice murmured inside Kyrix's mind. Now you will see what it means to lose. When the flagship finally limped back to Dominion space, it was barely recognizable. Its black hull was scorched, its engines cracked, and its crew broken. The High Lords of the Dominion assembled at the docks to witness its return. They expected to see trophies. They expected to see slaves in chains. They expected to see victory. Instead, they saw Kyrix, hollow-eyed, shaking, his golden armor cracked and blackened. He fell to his knees before the throne. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the lords demanded, "Where is the planet? Where are the prisoners? Where is the fleet?" Kyrix raised his head slowly. His eyes burned with something they had never seen before: terror. He whispered only 3 words. "We woke them." The chamber fell silent. "What did you wake, Kyrix?" His voice cracked as he answered. "Humans." The High Lord stared at him, uncomprehending. "Humans? What is a human?" But Kyrix only shook his head, his hands clawing at his own. Face, you don't understand, they were waiting. One lord scoffed. Waiting for what? Kyrix's eyes glowed faintly as he answered. For us. On the far edge of the galaxy, the blue planet sat quietly, its skies calm, its oceans still. But somewhere deep underground, vast black ships began to wake. Hidden armies stirred. A single voice whispered through the void. Soft, cold, certain. Come and see what happens if you try. The Zereth Dominion did not believe in fear. For centuries they crushed worlds and burned stars without a second thought. They called themselves the masters of all life. They called everyone else prey. Even when Lord Kyrix's fleet came back, broken, his words trembling, we woke them. The High Lords still believed they could win. It is only a small planet, one sneered. It is only a primitive species, another spat. 30 ships failed, we shall send 3,000. So they did. At the edges of the galaxy, a great fleet gathered. It was the largest armada the Dominion had sent in centuries. Black warships stretching across space like a river of knives. Carriers, dreadnoughts, storm ships, and slave legions. Enough firepower to burn 100 planets to ash. On the bridge of the flagship, Grand Admiral Jorak stood tall, his long black cloak sweeping behind him. His voice cut through the silence. By this time tomorrow, Earth will no longer exist. Prepare the invasion. The fleet roared forward, engines blazing, weapons charged. Eyes fixed on the little blue planet spinning quietly in the dark. But Earth was ready. At first, everything seemed normal to the Zereth fleet. Their ships approached orbit, scanning the surface. Dull defensive satellites, no shields. No fleets rising to meet them. Pathetic Admiral Jorak said, smiling. Learn nothing from the first lesson. He gave the order, land the armies, burn everything. Take what you want. The first wave of troop carriers descended through Earth's atmosphere. Black clouds followed them, lightning flashing as they fell toward the green and blue surface. Columns of soldiers marched out of the ships, towering aliens in spiked armor, carrying blades and rifles that had slaughtered millions on other worlds. But Earth was quiet. Cities were empty. Skies were clear. Oceans calm. No resistance. No sound. Just silence. Zhorak growled. Find them. Find someone to kill. That's when it started. The first report came from the northern landing zone. A platoon entered what looked like an abandoned city, streets empty, windows shattered. Then the air shimmered, and something moved through the shadows. The platoon screamed. Weapons fired in all directions, and then silence. When a scout ship arrived hours later, the streets were covered in black ash. The soldiers were gone. Bodies, no blood. Only the words scratched into a wall, welcome to Earth. The second report came from the ocean landing. Zareth warships hovered above the waves, ready to release their underwater troops. But the water began to churn. Dark shapes moving far below. One by one, the ships were pulled under. Not destroyed, dragged. The commanders could only watch in horror as massive black forms rose from the deep, coiling around their ships, cracking them open like eggs. When the waves calmed, nothing remained, just the ocean. Silent the third. Report never came at all. An entire battalion marching through forests vanished. Their last transmission was static, followed by a single human voice whispering, "Run." On the flagship, Admiral Jorak slammed his claws into the control panel. "Cowards," he snarled. "Show yourselves and fight." His officers exchanged nervous glances. One of them spoke hesitantly. "Sir, their tactics are not like others. They are not meeting us head-on, then crush the cities." Jorak shouted, "They cannot hide if there are no hiding places." The order was given. The fleet began firing on Earth's surface, burning forests, shattering mountains, boiling lakes. But the humans didn't appear. Instead, the fleet itself began to suffer. One destroyer's engines exploded without warning. Another's weapons turned inward, firing at its own decks. A carrier's lights went dark, and when it drifted past the flagship, its entire crew was gone, their armor lying neatly in piles, as though they had simply stepped out of it. On every screen across the fleet, the same white skull appeared again, and the same words, "We warned you." Jorek watched as the bridge lights flickered. Shadows moved in the corners of the room. His officers began hearing whispers, names spoken in their own minds, secrets no one else could know. One fell to his knees, clutching his head. "They're inside us," he screamed. "They're in our thoughts." Jorek snarled, grabbing him by the throat. "Shh, no one can get into my mind." But then, heard it too. Soft, mocking. Right behind his ear, "We already have." The fleet tried to retreat, but it was too late. From Earth's oceans, skies, and mountains, black ships rose, silent, massive, shaped like knives and ghosts. They moved too fast to track, their weapons invisible, but every shot they fired cut through Zareth. Armor like paper. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like hunters. They struck and vanished. They left messages written in fire across the skies. "Go home." Jorok stood on the bridge, watching as his mighty armada, his invincible fleet, was torn apart piece by piece. For the first time in his life, he felt it. Fear. He turned to his officers, his voice shaking. "Get us out of here." But one by one, his officers fell silent, their eyes wide, staring into the dark corners. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Zareth Dominion, once feared as gods, had been humiliated not once, but twice, by a species they called primitive. Their fleets were torn apart, their soldiers disappeared into shadows, their weapons betrayed them. And now, whispers of humans spread like fire. Everywhere the Zareth went, they began to see signs. On the walls of occupied cities, "Welcome to Earth," carved into the decks of their own ships. "We warned you," and burned into the skies above slave worlds. "We see you." A fear and emotion the Zareth thought they'd long forgotten began to creep into their bones. The Dominion tried to pretend it was nothing. They told their people it was propaganda. They claimed the humans were just clever, so lucky. Nothing more. But inside the high chamber, the lords argued bitterly. "Why haven't we crushed them?" demanded Lord Varys, his claws digging into the marble table. "Because," came the quiet reply of another lord, "you cannot crush what you cannot catch." It was true. Because now, the war was no longer just on Earth. It was everywhere, on a distant mining colony. Zareth troops marched through tunnels, hunting for hidden rebels. The air was hot and thick with dust. At first, nothing moved. Then, one by one, soldiers started vanishing into the shadows. Screams echoed through the caverns. When backup finally arrived, they found the walls painted with a single word, written in what looked like black ash: "Run." On a slave transport ship crossing deep space, alarms suddenly blared. All lights went out. The crew heard footsteps, but saw no one. When the lights came back, the slaves were gone. Every cell empty, every door open. On the bridge screen, a message appeared: "You can't cage what was born free." On a military outpost orbiting a gas giant, the entire garrison woke one night to find their weapons gone. Every rifle, every blade, every round of ammunition vanished. The only thing left was a crude knife stuck in the command post. Table with a note tied to it. "Let's see what you do now." Zareth began calling it the Ghost War, because the humans never came as an army. They came as shadows, whispers, nightmares. Admiral Jorok, still recovering from the failed invasion of Earth, was sent to the front lines again. He now wore no crown, no armor. His eyes were hollow, but he still commanded, though now with fear in his voice. His fleet was tasked with reclaiming a rebellious moon, but when they arrived, the moon was already lost. Zareth banners burned on every street. Prisoners walked free. And high above the capital, a human ship hung silently, black and sleek, almost invisible. Jorok stared at it through his viewport. "Why don't they just fight us like normal?" he muttered. That's when the voice came. It wasn't over the comms. It wasn't even in the room. It was inside his head. Why would we fight you like you expect? We're not like you. We're better. Shorak stumbled back, clutching his skull. Get out of my mind, he screamed. But the voice only laughed, quiet, cold, and cruel.
Ow.
We've been here all along. Across the galaxy, the pattern continued. Zareth soldiers refused to sleep because of the nightmares. Commanders shot their own men in panic, thinking they were humans. Entire fleets abandoned their posts after finding every navigation. System rewritten with a single destination, Earth. Slave races began rising up. Watching humans strike back gave them courage. And the Zareth learned something they never expected. The more brutal they became, the harder the humans fought, and the humans never stopped. In a secret chamber on the Zareth homeworld, the High Lords met in the dark. This cannot go on, Lord Varys hissed. We will lose everything. We already are, another whispered. They are ghosts. They are everywhere. They know everything about us. One lord leaned forward, his voice trembling. How? How can they know so much? From the corner of the room, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was not Zareth. It was not even alien. It was human, clad in black, face hidden. It stood silently before them, and then it spoke. Because we were here before you. The lords froze. Not a sound. The figure tilted its head slightly, then disappeared back into the shadows, leaving only the faint echo of its final words. We never left. On the bridge of a human command ship, deep in the void, General Harris watched reports come in from across the galaxy, planet after planet liberated, fleet after fleet broken, and always the same fear in Zareth eyes. He turned to his aide, a faint smile on his lips. They think we're ghosts, he said softly. The aide looked at him nervously. Aren't we? Harris's smile faded into something. Colder, no, he replied. We're hunters and their prey. The Zareth Dominion began to collapse under its own weight. Worlds they thought secure were now in flames. Allies abandoned them. Slaves rebelled. Everywhere they turned, humans were waiting. On every world. Every ship, every screen, the same message appeared again and again. We warned you. And in the quiet moments when the lords dared to sleep, they heard the whisper, we're still here. At the edge of the galaxy, on a cold, barren moon, a Zareth soldier knelt in the dirt, clutching his broken rifle. Around him lay the ruins of his unit. Not a single survivor, and carved into the ground in front of him were two words, your turn. When he looked up, the sky was full of black shapes, human ships descending, silent as death. The galaxy finally understood. This was no rebellion, no uprising. This was a hunt, and humanity had only just begun. The galaxy was falling apart. The Zareth, its dominion, once the unshakable rulers of stars, were now hunted, their fleets broken, their armies terrified, their slaves rising in rebellion. And yet the humans still hadn't revealed everything. Not yet, not fully. That was about to change. On the edge of Dominion space, a black cloud moved. Not smoke, not dust, but ships. Thousands of them, vast and silent, shaped like knives and shadows. They advanced without flashing lights, without war horns, without warnings. Humanity had decided it was time to show the galaxy what real war looked like. On the Zareth homeworld, the High Lords argued bitterly. We must hold our ground, one shouted, slamming his clawed fist on the marble table. We can't let them push any further. Another lord, older and wiser, simply stared at the floor. You still don't understand, he said softly. We are no longer fighting for victory. We are fighting to survive. Suddenly an officer burst into the chamber, gasping for breath. They're here, he croaked. The humans, they've come. The lords froze. Where? Demanded the oldest. The officer swallowed hard. Everywhere. And it was true. Human fleets erupted from the void all across Dominion space. They didn't just attack one world, they attacked them all. From icy moons to burning deserts, from deep oceans to glittering cities. Human warships descended like a storm. Black fighters cut through the skies. Massive carriers hovered silently, releasing waves of armored troops. Everywhere they went, they left the same mark: freedom. Fire. On the slave world of Koresh, Zareth troops tried to hold the capital. They lined the streets with tanks, waiting for the humans to come charging. But the humans didn't charge. Instead, the Zareth tanks exploded one by one without warning. Their weapons stopped working. The radios played strange whispers. And then, black-armored soldiers stepped out of the smoke, silent, unstoppable. The humans didn't speak. They didn't take prisoners. They simply moved forward, cutting down everything in their path. On the ocean world of Tyla, Zareth warships patrolled the seas, but the water began to boil. Massive human submarines rose from the depths, unleashing torpedoes that split the Zareth ships in two. Drones swarmed out of the waves, dragging screaming soldiers into the black water below. On the fortress moon of Drakkar, the Dominion's strongest garrison prepared for a siege. They activated shields that had never fallen in centuries. They armed every cannon, every turret. They waited, and then the human fleet arrived. It didn't fire. It didn't even move closer. Instead, the humans hacked the moon's shields, turning them inside out. The fortress melted from the inside. And when the humans finally landed, they walked through the ashes of the once mighty fortress without resistance. The galaxy watched in shock. For the first time, they saw the humans. Clearly not just hunters, not just ghosts, but conquerors when they chose to be. They struck with precision and fury, dismantling centuries of Zareth power in days. And they didn't stop. On the bridge of a human flagship, a massive black vessel known only as Eclipse, General Harris stood before a vast holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots, Zareth strongholds, blinked out one by one. Blue lines, human fleets, spread further and further. An aide approached nervously. "Sir, the Dominion fleets are retreating everywhere. Do we stop now?" Harris's eyes narrowed. "Did they stop when they crushed our people?" The aide swallowed hard. "No, sir. Then neither do we." On Dominion-controlled worlds, the people began tearing down Zareth banners themselves. They painted human skulls on the walls, the same symbol that had haunted the Zareth for months. They rose up, armed with whatever they could find, fighting alongside the humans, and for the first time in their lives, the galaxy believed. They believed the Zareth could fall. They believed the humans would win. And they believed freedom was possible. On the Zareth homeworld, panic spread like fire. The skies darkened as news of defeat after defeat poured in. Lords fled the capital. Slaves began rebelling even there in the shadow of the black throne itself. And then the warning sirens began to wail, high above the plain. The black flag of humanity waved over the ruins of the Zareth throne. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy was free to breathe. The Dominion's fleets lay in smoking pieces, their armies scattered and broken, their homeworld burning under human ships. But this was not the end. This was only the beginning. Because as the Dominion fell, the galaxy began to rise. On the ocean world of Tyla, where millions of fish-like people had lived as slaves for centuries, the humans walked through the capital, freeing prisoners one by one. The Tyla people stood silently at first, unsure what to do then. One by one, they dropped to their knees, not in submission, but in thanks. A human soldier leaned down to lift the Tyla leader back to his feet. "No kneeling," the human said simply. "We don't want your fear. We want your strength." And the Tyla understood. They picked up their chains and threw them into the sea. On the mining moon of Orvik, where whole generations had been born in chains, human commandos cut through the darkness, opening cell doors and arming the miners with Zareth rifles. The miners didn't hesitate. They turned those rifles on their former masters. The entire moon erupted in fire and shouts. The miners raised their fists to the sky and roared, "We are free." The humans handed them helmets and ammunition. Then, "Help us free the others." All across the stars, slave worlds erupted. On Koresh, farmers beat their masters with their own whips. Factory workers locked their overseers inside the forges they had once toiled in. On the frozen planet Zethar, children threw stones at retreating Dominion tanks, and always at the heart of every battle were the humans, black-armored, silent, leading the charge, and on every wall, every screen, every banner, the same message appeared. We are not here to rule you. We are here to free you. At first, the newly liberated worlds were afraid of the humans. Who wouldn't be? They moved like ghosts. They struck like hunters. They'd crushed the Dominion in weeks. But the humans never stayed to conquer. They handed over weapons, trained the people, and left. And as they departed, the people began to understand. The humans didn't come to enslave. They came to make sure no one else ever would. On the bridge of the human flagship Eclipse, General Harris watched as reports of uprisings came in from every corner of the galaxy. His aide approached, breathless. "Sir, over 30 planets have risen against the Zereth today alone." Harris nodded, his expression calm. "Good. That's 30 more who will never kneel again." The aide hesitated. "Sir, the Zereth are fleeing to the Outer Rim. Should we pursue them?" Harris looked down at the stars below. "No," he said. "Let the galaxy chase them now. Let the ones they hurt finish what we started." On the Zereth homeworld, chaos reigned. What was left of the Dominion's army was holed up in the capital, surrounded by fire and shouting. The slaves, millions of them, stormed the palace walls. They carried stones, knives, stolen rifles. In their own fury, a single human soldier stood at the gates, leaning on his rifle. As the mob surged past him, he said nothing, just nodded once, as the people swept forward and tore down the last banners of the Zereth. When it was over, the palace was nothing but rubble. The people gathered in the square, chanting a single word, human. But the soldier shook his head and raised a hand. Then, in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the crowd, he spoke, "Not human." On world after world, the humans said the same thing. "This is your fight now. We've broken the chains. You keep them off." And the galaxy listened. For the first time in 1,000 years, the oppressed stood tall. They began organizing fleets of their own. They began building defenses of their own, began hunting the last Zereth war bands, hiding among the stars, and they began carving new words into stone, metal and memory. We are not prey. The Zereth tried to regroup. What few fleets they still had fled to distant corners of the galaxy, trying to hide. But there was nowhere to hide anymore. On the farthest asteroid belts, they were dragged out of caves by miners they once enslaved. On forgotten moons, they were hunted through the snow by farmers they once whipped. On gas giants, they were cornered. By soldiers they thought they had broken. And at every execution, at every rebellion, at every final stand, the humans were there watching, not leading, not ruling, just watching, and making sure the galaxy stayed free, in the high chamber of the fallen Dominion. A new council met for the first time, not Zereth, but representatives from every liberated world. Attila Elder rose and spoke. "We were slaves for 1,000 years, but now we stand free thanks to the humans." Cheers erupted. But when the elder raised a hand, the chamber quieted. But they did not come to rule us. They came to remind us who we are. And now it is our duty to finish what they began. Earth, quiet and far away, General Harris stood on a hill looking at the stars. An officer stepped beside him. "Sir, the galaxy has risen. The Dominion is finished. Do we go home now?" Harris didn't answer at first. He kept staring at the stars, at the countless lights where the people of the galaxy were finally standing up for themselves. Then, softly, he said, "We never left." The officer smiled faintly, and if another tyrant rises, Harris's eyes hardened. "Then we hunt again." On every free world, the people began to tell stories of the humans, the black ships, the silent hunters, the shadows that brought freedom, and they carved a new phrase into the stones of their capitals, into the walls of their homes, into the minds of their children. They ruled without mercy until they faced humanity. The galaxy was free now, or so it seemed. The black flag of humanity no longer waved over burning cities. The stars were calm, the people cheered, and the Zereth Dominion was gone, but not everyone believed it was over. Because the High Lords of the Zereth, the ones who had ordered the slavery, the killings, the wars, were still out there, hiding, planning, waiting, and humanity had no intention of letting them escape justice. On the human flagship Eclipse, General Harris stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. It glowed with thousands of red points, each marking a possible hiding place of the High Lords. Every few minutes, a red point vanished as human hunters struck. One of his aides spoke quietly, "Sir, many are calling for mercy. The people say the Zereth have been broken, that we should let them go." Harris didn't take his eyes off the map. "Mercy," he said softly. Then after a pause, "They ruled without it. They'll die without it." And with a wave of his hand, the hunt began. The humans called it the Reckoning. To the Zereth, it was something worse. It was their nightmare. Made real, on a forgotten moon deep in the void, a group of High Lords gathered in a hidden palace carved into ice. They thought they were safe there beyond reach, surrounded by traps and guards. But the humans were already waiting. As the High Lords feasted in the great hall, the lights went out, the air turned cold, and from the shadows, black-armored figures stepped forward, silent, weapons glowing faintly. One of the lords stood, shouting, "We surrender." But the humans didn't answer. They simply advanced. And one by one, the lords fell, their golden masks cracking as they hit the icy floor, on a gas giant's floating city. Another group of lords hid among merchants and smugglers. They changed their faces. They paid fortunes to vanish. But when they awoke one morning, every single window of their tower was etched with the words, "We see you."
I might fall.
The tower was empty. No screams, no struggle, just silence, and the faint smell of ash. The galaxy began to realize humanity wasn't just hunting the Zereth. They were making a point. Every lord they caught was displayed, not to humiliate, but to remind the people what they had suffered. And always the same message followed. This is not vengeance. This is justice. Even the galaxy's oldest species, who had watched quietly as the Zereth enslaved others, began to whisper of the humans. Relentless pursuit. On the ancient world of Kitharis, a scholar wrote, "They do not kill for rage. They kill because they refuse to let monsters hide among the stars." The final High Lord Varys, the most cunning of them all, had fled to the outermost edge of the galaxy. There he built a fortress so vast it blotted out the sky, defended by fleets, weapons, and mercenaries. "Let them come," he sneered, his claws tapping the arm of his throne. "Let them try." Didn't have to wait long. The Eclipse arrived alone, drifting into the system without a sound. No fleet, no allies. Just one black ship. Varys laughed. When he saw it, one ship? That's all? Pathetic. But when the Eclipse stopped above the fortress, something began to change. The sky darkened. The stars vanished. And from the shadows behind the ship, others appeared. Thousands of them, ships so black they seemed carved from the void itself. They had been there all along, hidden, waiting. Varys froze as his fleet fired everything they had. Missiles. Plasma suns themselves, but nothing touched the human ships. The human weapons, though, burned through his defenses like paper, and then the fortress doors exploded inward. Varys fled deep into the fortress, running through corridors of stone and steel, but everywhere he turned, there they were. Human hunters, silent and unyielding, closing in. Finally, he reached the throne room, gasping, his claws scratching at the door to seal it. But when he turned, Harris was already there. The general stood in the center of the room, unarmed, helmet under one arm. His eyes were cold, his voice calm. "Varys." The Lord backed away, baring his teeth. "You can't. You see." The galaxy was quiet now. The black banners of humanity no longer waved over ruins. The screams of the Dominion had faded into whispers. The fires had burned out, and the people began to rebuild. But even in peace, the humans remained. They didn't leave. They didn't disappear. They simply watched. On the newly freed world of Koresh, children ran through streets that used to be lined with chains. Now, they painted stars and skulls on the walls, not out of fear, but as a promise. Tyla people, once slaves on ocean worlds, began building their own fleets, dark blue ships with silver fins. When asked why they chose such a design, their leader simply said, "We learned from the hunters." And on frozen Zethar, where the mines had been silent for months, workers now forged weapons and ships for themselves, calling them freedom forges. Each bore the same words stamped into their steel: "We remember." Yet everywhere, no matter how bright the stars seemed, the humans still moved in the shadows. On Earth, General Harris sat in a quiet room overlooking the night sky. His aide stood behind him, holding a datapad. "The galaxy is rebuilding, sir," the aide said. "Fleets are forming, alliances are strong. The last Dominion cells have been destroyed." Harris nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the stars. "And do they still fear us?" he asked. The aide hesitated before answering. "Yes, sir. Everyone still fears you." A faint smile tugged at Harris's lips. "Good." In the Galactic Council, a new assembly of free people's representatives from dozens of worlds argued and debated. They planned trade routes. They set laws. They tried to imagine a future without chains, but always somewhere in the back of the chamber stood a pair of humans in black armor, silent, unblinking. Reminders of what could happen if anyone tried to rise too high again. No one dared raise their voice too far. No one dared dream of conquest. Not anymore. Stories about the humans began to spread, stories no one could quite confirm, but no one dared deny. Some said they could disappear into thin air. Others swore they could hear your thoughts, or see through walls. Many believed they had weapons that could tear a planet apart in seconds, but chose not to use them. On the shattered moon of Draker, an old miner told his grandson, "They don't need armies. They don't need ships. Just one human is enough to end a war." And the boy nodded silently, because everyone believed it. In a secret chamber beneath the council hall, a group of scholars met in private. On the table before them lay old files, data stolen from Dominion archives, sealed away for centuries. One of the scholars opened a file labeled simply Project ASHES, and what they found inside chilled them to the bone. According to the documents, humanity had fought the Zereth before, not just in this war, but thousands of years ago. Back then, the humans were even more powerful. The Zereth had nearly been wiped out, and only survived because the humans chose to disappear. One scholar read aloud, "The humans withdrew into the shadows, not because they were weak, but because they were merciful. They left us alive to see if we could change." The room fell silent. Another scholar whispered, "So, they've been here the whole time?" And the oldest among them nodded slowly. "Yes, they never left. They were just waiting." On the edge of the galaxy, deep in the void, a hidden human ship hovered in darkness. Inside, soldiers trained in silence, learning weapons no one else in the galaxy could understand. At the center of the ship sat a strange device, a black sphere, pulsing faintly with energy. Some called it the Heart of Ashes. It was said to hold the memories and the power of humanity's first war. When a young soldier asked what it was for, his commander simply said, "Insurance. For the next tyrant."
Back on Earth, Harris?
Walked through a quiet garden, alone. He stopped at a stone monument covered in names of humans who had died in the war. "We didn't come to rule," he murmured to the stone, "but we can't walk away either, can we?" Looked up at the stars, countless points of light, and added softly, "Not while they're still out there. Because despite the peace, humans knew better. Tyrants were patient. Tyrants were clever. And the galaxy had a long memory, but an even longer hunger for power. So humanity stayed, not as conquerors, not as kings, but as hunters. And everywhere they went, they left the same warning behind: we are watching." On Zethar, children learned it as a nursery rhyme. Be kind, be strong, But don't forget the humans see what you don't yet. On Koresh, soldiers painted it on their helmets. Don't run, they'll find you. And on the broken throne of the Zareth Dominion, now a museum, a single phrase was carved into the black stone. They ruled the galaxy without mercy until they faced humanity. The legacy of the humans was not just fear, it was not just war, it was a memory, a promise, shadow cast over the stars,
Yes.
reminding everyone that freedom was not free, it had to be guarded, and so long as humanity remained, it would be. On the eclipse, preparing to vanish once again into the void, Harris stood at the viewport as the galaxy glittered before him. His aide asked quietly, "Sir, what happens when they forget what we did here?" Harris's voice was soft but firm. "Then we remind them." The ship's engines hummed. The stars outside stretched into lines. And the humans disappeared into the darkness once more, leaving only stories and the chilling knowledge that somewhere out there the hunters still waited. Centuries passed. The stars spun. Empires rose and fell. And the story of humanity became a legend. On countless worlds, people spoke of the hunters who came from the shadows, destroyed the Zareth Dominion, and vanished into the void. Some believed the humans were still out, there watching. Others claimed they had died off, leaving only myths behind. A few even dared to say that humanity had never existed at all, that they were just a story told to frighten tyrants and comfort the oppressed. But the galaxy was forgetting. And when the galaxy forgot, the hunters came back. It started quietly. Ships began to vanish along the trade routes. Entire fleets went silent in deep space. On remote worlds, strange symbols appeared overnight, a black skull over white. Stars painted on walls and carved into stone. At first, no one understood what it meant. But the elders of the free worlds knew. They trembled. On Zethar, the old miner who had once seen the humans whispered to his grandchildren, "They're back." And on the Galactic Council world, a new empire had risen, not as cruel as the Zareth, but just as ambitious. They called themselves the Varan Ascendancy. They believed the galaxy was theirs by right. They built vast fleets, enslaved weaker species, and crowned themselves rulers of the stars. They thought no one could stop them. They thought the humans were gone forever, until the stars themselves began to go dark at the edge of ascendancy. Space. A fleet of 100 Varan warships patrolled a gas giant. The admiral leaned back in his chair, bored. Then, his sensors went black. Every screen on his ship turned off at once. In the silence, a single message appeared, glowing faintly on every screen. "You forgot us?" Then the black ships came. They appeared out of nowhere, silent, cold, endless. Not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of thousands. The humans had returned. And this time, they brought the full weight of their power. On the bridge of the human flagship Eclipse, Harris, older now, but still unbroken, stood before the stars. His aide, a young officer, looked nervous. "Sir, the Ascendancy. They don't even remember what the Zareth did. They don't know what they're facing." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time they learned." He raised his hand. "Release it." The heart of ashes, the strange black sphere hidden in the depths of the eclipse awakened. It pulsed once, and the void itself seemed to shiver. Across the galaxy, stars dimmed. Time seemed to slow. And the full fury of humanity, the power they had hidden even from themselves, began to unfold. The Ascendancy fought, of course. They fired their cannons, unleashed their fleets, hurled suns at the black ships. But it didn't matter. The human weapons cut through them like glass. Their defenses crumbled. Their fleets burned. And in the chaos, the people of the galaxy began to rise again, inspired by the sight of the hunters returning. On slave worlds, chains were shattered overnight. On occupied stations, workers dragged their masters into the streets. On hidden moons, entire populations rebelled, chanting, "The hunters have come." The council chamber of the Ascendancy, the Emperor himself stood defiantly as the doors crashed open. A single human stepped inside, black armor glowing faintly, rifle at his side. The Emperor sneered. You think you can rule us? The human tilted his head. We don't rule. Then he raised his weapon, and the Emperor's reign ended. On every world the ascendancy had touched, the same scene played out. The humans appeared, struck without warning, and disappeared again, leaving freedom, fire, and fear in their wake. And with every victory, the legend of humanity grew darker and brighter. On Earth, quiet and green, after so many centuries. Harris finally stood before the great monument in the garden. It was no longer just a stone covered in names. Now it was a tower of black crystal, glowing faintly, inscribed with a single phrase in every language known to the galaxy. We don't rule, we hunt. His aide approached carefully. Sir, it's done. The ascendancy has fallen. The galaxy is free again. Harris nodded slowly, but didn't smile. For now, he said. The aide hesitated. Why? Why do we hide our power, sir? Why not just keep the galaxy under control forever? Harris turned.